Good evening, everybody.
Kavod Haraf, how are you?
Baruch Hashem, thank you.
We're in Kavod Haraf.
Okay, here it is. So we're doing Kaf, as you said. Okay. All right, so here it says in the tour, כשם שאסור לבשל לעצמו, ככה אסור לבשל לאחרים. So it says, just like you're not allowed to cook for yourself when you don't have an eruv, also you're not allowed to cook for others as well. Let's see in the tour what else he says there. אפילו בביתם, even in their house. So if you go to somebody's house, right, and he made an eruv, but you did not, so you cannot cook for him. Interesting. שאין העולם יודעים שהוא לאחרים, so as people don't know that it's for others, וגם לאחרים אסורים לבשל בו, לא. And also he says others are also forbidden to cook for him. Why is that? Because he didn't make an eruv. ואין לו תקנה אלא שיקנה קמחו ותבשילו לאחרים, והן אופים מבשלים נותנים לו לשלהם. So he says, okay, so then what can he do, right? What's his recourse? So he says the recourse is you're going to buy some flour or some produce for other people, and they will cook for you, right? So they can, in other words, they will acquire, you're giving them as a gift. So once they acquire it, it's then it's theirs. So then they can cook and give also to you, some to you, some leftovers to you, some scraps. Okay. So that's the recourse that he has. Good. והן אופין ומשלין נותנים לו דשלהם. So he says they will bake and cook, and give to him as we said. Okay, okay. הם ממשלין ונותנים לו, ואחר כך אפילו בביתו יכולים לבשל. So he says afterwards, I'm sorry, then he says even in his house they can do that. Why is that? Because the produce belongs to them. So once it belongs to them, they can even do it in his house. Okay, so that's the tour. Okay, interesting parameters over here. Okay. So it says Beit Yosef here brings a source for this. Sham, it's over there in the Gemara, Yud Zayin Amud Aleph. Ibay lehu, mi shelo iniach eruvet tavshilin, hu ne'esar ve'en kimcho ne'esar. So it says, right, whoever did not make an eruv, he's forbidden, and also, but his flour is not forbidden. Or dilma hu ne'esar ve'kimcho ne'esar. Or they're both forbidden, perhaps. It's a question that the Gemara is asking. So it answers. Right? What is the practical difference here? To give his flour to others, that's the practical difference. If you're going to tell me that he's forbidden and his flour is forbidden, so therefore, as we said, the recourse would be to give his flour to somebody else and let him do it. If you're telling me, right, that he is forbidden and his flour is not forbidden, so then he wouldn't have to give his flour to somebody else, right? They can just do it, even if it belongs to him. Right, so Gemara asks, right, what's the answer to that question? Tashma, so it brings a source for this, right? Right, whoever didn't make eruv tavshilin, how does it lo yefeh? He shouldn't bake, velo yevashel, and he shouldn't cook, velo yatamin, and also they shouldn't what is that called? I forgot. He shouldn't. Okay, I'll tell you in a second. Anyway, right? So lo velo leachrim, not his and not for him and not for somebody else. The velo leachrim ofin bashlin lo, and also others cannot do for him as well. Right. So just remember, right? It's insulation, right? He can't do insulation either without the eruv. That's what he's saying. You guys know what this means, insulation? What are we talking about here? We're not talking about insulating your walls.
It's how we wrap blankets or something around a pot to keep the food warm.
Right, exactly. They used to do that in the old days, Even nowadays, some people do it. In Israel, it's very common. They insulate the pot in some kind of a substance in order to keep it warm or even make it even hotter. When I learned this in the Gemara in Shabbat, I was wondering, like, how do you make something hotter by insulating it? You understand my question? I mean, it can. Okay, I can understand if it can retain the heat, but how does it add heat to insulate? Anybody have an idea for that? It's a little bit too strange, whatever. But the Gemara says that there is a way to add heat also. In other words, it raises the temperature of the food. But it depends on what substance you insulate it with. Not every substance is able to add heat. Some are only able to retain the heat. But there are some that add heat. I'm not going to get into all the categories, right? Whatever. But the point is like this, the reason why insulation can add heat is because what happens is, right, that it takes that heat which was in that pot, and instead of it getting scattered, like in the room, that heat, it concentrates it into one place, that's what it does. It shuts it down into one area. So that can sometimes, if the insulation is a very good insulation, it can even raise the temperature of the food, not only to retain. Why is that? Because when you reduce the area, right? It's like a physics kind of equation, When you reduce the area of something, of the heat, the temperature goes up. Okay. Oh well, yeah, yeah.
It goes up because of the material you're using, right? To heat
It
to
goes
keep
up because you're reducing the area where the heat can be. You
right,
know
but
what I mean?
also the material helps, no?
Right, but
That
the
is good.
material, yeah, you're right. But how does it, how it should retain the heat, but how could it add temperature? So the answer is because it's going into a smaller area, so it's increasing the temperature. It's a
But we,
physical thing.
It's like a
we
recycling, no? It's recycling heat, so to speak.
Right, I'm sorry.
It's like recycling the heat in some way, because it goes.
Yeah, we don't call that recycling. We call that insulation, right? That's what it is.
but we're talking about something that's still on an element of some kind, right?
Yeah, that's a very good question. If it was on a fire, so then it's obvious it's going to increase the heat, right? There's no, that's not a big brainer. It's a no brainer. Even without the insulation, it'll do that. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about when there is no fire. It can increase the temperature. I was thinking about that. I had, my head was like, trying to get around it. Like what's going on with that? So I remember I had one rabbi, that I was learning this kollel. This was before I was in Maran's kollel. So I had this question. I was learning this Gemara. So I went to ask him. I said, "Can you explain to me, like, how does that add the heat?" I don't understand. How does it raise the temperature? So this rabbi tells me. He says, just accept it. He says, don't ask questions.
Yeah, I would suggest there has to be some kind of source, like even if it's the sun or
Yeah.
there has to be
No,
something.
there's no source. It's just it's just
Law of conservation of
heat of the
energy would
pot,
suggest
which is getting
otherwise, but
insulated in
I'm
something.
gonna let you do it.
For instance, like there are certain substances that add heat, right? The Gemara says, which are those substances? One of them is sand. If you insulate in sand, because it's a very good insulator, it can actually add, to heat to the pot. I know you're trying to get your head around it. That's what I was trying to do. Also,
I'm just saying it's the law of conservation of energy. So the
yeah.
sand would actually have to have heat to transfer.
That's the thing. The sand doesn't have heat. It's
Okay,
just
well,
a piece of sand.
then I'm gonna back away from this one because scientifically,
So that's the thing. That's exactly the problem I had. But the
What
rabbi told me,
science?
just accept it. He got mad at me, because I was like he thought I was trying to question, if the Gemara is true. That wasn't my intention to question if it's true or not. I was just trying to understand, the mechanism, the way it works. Okay, whatever. I'm not gonna get into too much into this stuff. Okay, I'll let you guys sit on it for a while. I'll let you, think about it, ponder it for a while. Okay.
Isn't it sand glass?
They make glass from sand. The sand is not glass. They make it. They make it by putting heat into it. Fire. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah. Glass is made from sand, right? Okay. Very good. So that's the story there. I see you guys are a little bit uneasy about that. I also was uneasy about it when I first learned it. I was like, "What? What is that?" Couldn't understand it. Okay. Anyway, let's go on. So, in other words, what we're saying over here is that you're not allowed to do insulation without making an eruv, right? So the question is, why do you need an eruv to do insulation? You guys, you understand my question? Like, it's not cooking. You're not cooking. You're not lighting a fire. So why do you need an eruv for that? So the answer is, the rabbis decreed, that insulation, needs to be forbidden on Shabbat and Yom Tov, in certain cases. On Yom Tov, probably it's more lenient, but the problem is that since you're doing it for Shabbat, in this case, right, you're doing it on Yom Tov for Shabbat, so you're doing like preparation, that's why they told you not to do it without an eruv. Okay. Interesting ideas. Good. Let's go on. Ketzad, how so? He says, "Who ose right mikne makne kemacho uleachirim ve'ofin v'ashlin lo." Right. So again, right. That's what he says in the Gemara here. How does he solve the problem? Right. What's a recourse? Again, right. He buys it and gives it to his friend, right, as a gift, whatever, and his friend will cook, since it belongs to him now. This is the way you solve the problem. Okay, goes on. So Gemara says, right, you see from there, from all this discussion, right, back and forth, that he is forbidden if he didn't make an eruv, and also his food is forbidden as well. That's why he has to give his food to somebody else. He's got to change ownership. Okay, good. Pirush Aran says the Ran, le'akune belashon matana belo sudar ela kishar metaltelin aniknin b'meshicha. Oh, so says the Ran, right? It's an interesting question. So it gets into this, right? When we say you got to give this, thing as a gift to your friend, the question is, how do you give this gift? In other words, what's the vehicle of acquisition that you do in order to bequeath it to him? This is the question, right? So says the Ran, what you do is, he says, right, tell him I'm giving it to you as a gift, and then he makes an acquisition by pulling the item, right? That's called meshicha, right? It's one of the forms of acquisition. Meshicha. Pulls it. So he says you don't really need any handkerchief over here, right? To make acquire by way of a handkerchief. Right? You don't need that. Just pull it, and that's it, it's done, right? You're done. Okay. We had a discussion about this, for Passover always. We talk about these issues, which is when you're selling the chametz to a goy, the question is, how does the goy acquire it? Because usually we're talking about like a large sum of chametz, and he's not even there, the goy, to pick up your stuff and pull it, right? So how does he acquire it? So what we do, with the goy is we do, handkerchief, right? Kinyan sudar with that, and then also we do a contract, just to be on the safe side. So we do like two methods of acquisition, contract and the handkerchief. This way, right, we can sleep safe and sound, right? At night, the chametz is sold. There should be some kind of mode of acquisition, when you sell the chametz to a goy. And so same thing over here. That's what you're trying to say. But the trick is like this, that if you look in the halachot of laws of acquisition, the thing is, that the Jew and the goy don't acquire in the same manner, So that's why you got to know who you're dealing with. You're dealing with a goy, you're dealing with a Jew. Each one has his own acquisition. So when you're selling chametz to a goy, right, it's not exactly the same as selling, this thing to a Jew, right, or whatever, Not the same thing. Okay, very good. Let's go on. So he says, right, Mordechai katab bahag, says the Mordechai, name of the bahag, itir laknoto b'yom tov mishum mitzvah. Oh, so says the bahag, but you can also do this acquisition even on Yom Tov, right? You're doing an acquisition. So, oftentimes, in general, right, we don't allow acquisitions on Yom Tov. Why? Because, it's commerce. Shabbat also, same thing, right? Obviously. So how do we allow it here? So it says because it's a mitzvah, you want to make food for your holiday, right? For Shabbat. So it's a mitzvah. That's how we allow it, right? So the same thing, we talked about this before, if you remember, right? That, if you don't have, let's say something, you're lacking something, so you can go to the store, and to the goy, right? And, buy something on Shabbat, on Yom Tov, right? Without giving money, of course, right? Without mentioning a price. We talked about that, right? So, what do you call it? How do we acquire that? How do we allow that? It's acquisition, right? Because it's a mitzvah. You need it for Shabbat. That's why, that's how we allow it. Otherwise, we won't allow that either. That's what he's saying. Okay, very good. So let's go on. וכן לולב ואתרוג יוצאים בהם כל העם על ידי מתנה על מנת להחזיר. Oh, so he says, right, another trick, right, that we do on the holidays, which is, what happens is, right, that in many communities, in most communities maybe, perhaps, right, what they do is they acquire, like the synagogue community, right, acquires a lulav and etrog, the four right species, arba minim, right, and it belongs to the community, so whoever wants to come and use it and do the mitzvah can do it, right? They put it down on the table in the shul, and whoever wants to come, and use it can do the mitzvah. But here's the thing, right? That on the first day of Sukkot, in order to do the mitzvah, which is from the Torah, lulav, you have to own that lulav. It has to be yours. That's what he's talking about here. So, therefore, right, but the rest of the days it's only from the rabbi, so that you don't have to own it. It could be also somebody else's. The rabbis were not so stringent like that. But then the first day, it has to be yours. So, the question is like this, right? When the shul, it brings that, communal lulav, right, etrog, how do you fulfill your obligation on the first day? It's not yours, it belongs to the shul. So he says, right, what you do is, each person, who picks it up to do the mitzvah is acquiring it, right, on condition to return it to the shul. So there is a vehicle of acquisition there as well. When he picks it up, to do the mitzvah, right, he acquires it. That's what happens. And the shul allows him to do that. Why? Because they know that otherwise, they can't do the mitzvah in any way. It has to be acquired. Okay, very good. You got the idea. So, right, that's what he's talking about here. כל העם על ידי מתנה על מנת להחזיר וכבתה קונין, right, קונין משכיב מרע ואפילו בשבת, right? So it's also the same thing. He says if you have a person who's like deathly ill, right, שכיב מרע, and we have to acquire something from him on Shabbat. What do we acquire from him? He may be talking about, when, right, this deathly ill person, he wants to give a get to his wife, before he dies. So we can even do that on Shabbat. So you need acquisition there, to acquire the get. So we can do that on Shabbat because he's deathly ill. The rabbis allowed that. But anybody else who wants to get divorced, right, cannot do so on Shabbat. The rabbis don't allow that. Even if you wrote the get before, right, still a problem. Okay, very good. So many mevin devarav. So he says, I don't understand the words he says, right? The Bet Yosef is saying here, right? Belashon te'eh belashon matana belo sudar my iria mishum mitzvah belo mitzvah nami amai litzar ve'eh bekinyan sudar my te belulav hagabes lulav lav bekinyan sudar makninan. Okay, well, okay, let's go step by step with this. Right, he has a couple of problems over here with this rabbi, the way he wrote up this this treatise of his, right? Whatever, right? So what's the problem? Problem is just like this, that if you're talking about that you're giving it to him, right, as a gift, and you're not using a handkerchief, as we said, right, that method of acquisition. My iria mishum mitzvah says, why does it have to be mitzvah? Velo mitzvah nami amai litzar. So it says, even if it's not a mitzvah, why should it be forbidden? So in other words, he's trying to tell you, right, that when it comes to kinyan sudar, acquiring it with a handkerchief, it really should not be forbidden even on Yom Tov or Shabbat. Amai litzar. And if you're going to tell me, he says, if you're going to tell me that we're doing right with a handkerchief, what does it mean from lulav? So when it comes to lulav, we don't acquire it with a handkerchief. We do it as we said, right? We pick it up and that's it, right? We acquire it by picking it up. So either way, right? He says it doesn't make sense. His words over here. He's got a problem with it. Can't grapple with it. Okay, so right. So it says, furthermore, since it's possible to give him his flour without pulling it, to leka mitzvah b'kinyan sudar. So he says, then there's really no mitzvah to do it with a handkerchief. So then how did he write? Why did they allow it? So he says it's possible that even to do it by pulling it, to acquire by pulling it without a handkerchief. So it could be that the Mordechai holds this is also forbidden because it looks like commerce. Okay, but it says in the place of the mitzvah, they allowed it anyway, right? Even though it's not allowed in general. That's the way I understood it, by the way, in the beginning, when I first read it. Okay, whatever. Anyway. So is that what the two wrote, he says, right? That the reason why it's forbidden to cook for others, even in their house, because people don't know that it belongs to, that it's for them, it's not for him. And only that, so he said, it doesn't seem right, he says, that explanation. So how do people know, right, if he made an eruv or not? It's something you do in the privacy of your own home. So how do they know about this? How do people know about that? They have no idea what's going on. Oh, lo irev. So also it says, even if they know, right, he didn't make an eruv, since he's not cooking in his house, and rather in somebody else's house, right? So that already displays, right, that he's cooking for others. So he says, therefore, right, he says the reason is because since he didn't make an eruv, he's forbidden to bake or to cook at all. Not for him and not for anybody else, right? The rabbis penalized him, like that. Just like it's forbidden to cook from Yom Tov to the weekday, right? Whether it's for him or some others, right? Okay. That what she wrote, right? Regarding the balai tur, so it says, right, it doesn't hold by that. I think we have to go back to the tour, right? Read a little bit further, because this already we didn't do. Okay, let's see. Right, so it says the tour like this. Ubalai tur katab mistabram. So says the Balai tur that it makes sense to say אחרים שלא הניחו עירוב אופין ובשלים למי שהניחו לשליחו של אדם כמותו. So it makes sense to say that others, that didn't make an eruv, they can bake and cook for somebody who did make an eruv. Why? Because he says the agent of a person is just like himself. Good point, right? So he says, but the Torah says, I don't agree with that. Because it says in the Talmud not like that, right? Even though it seems to make sense, but the Talmud says no, right? What does it say in Talmud? Right? It says, he cannot cook for others either. So if he transgressed, right, willingly, and he cooked, he can eat it. That's the thing, we don't penalize him not to eat it. So let's say, whatever, for some reason he transgressed, right, and he cooked, even though he didn't make an eruv, he's allowed to have that dish. We don't penalize them for that. The rabbis didn't go that far.
Does he rely on his rabbi's eruv or no?
You're asking what, like in this case?
Yeah, I mean, are they saying basically?
So what we're saying is like this, right? That even though nobody made an eruv for him, whatever, he's not eligible, whatever it is, right? One or the other. He's not eligible to be helped by his rabbi, whatever it is. Either way, right, if he cooked, he can eat it. But if his rabbi made for him, right, and he's eligible for that, even the lechatchila he can cook. You know what I mean? So we're talking about here that nobody made for him.
Yeah, I thought that the rabbi's eruv doesn't qualify if you it only qualifies if you accidentally or forgot or whatever. But if you just said, "Oh, I'm just not going to make one," it doesn't count. Exactly.
That's what we said, right? I think we learned it last week about that issue with the rabbi, right? So, but we're not talking about that particular issue here, In other words, whether he did it on purpose or not. Here, what we're saying is that he cooked on purpose, even though he knew that he didn't have an eruv.
Okay.
So we're not really dealing with that issue with the rabbi, here. But it's clear, right, that we're talking here that nobody made an eruv for him, right? For whatever reason, either that he wasn't eligible, or the rabbi fell asleep, whatever. He fell asleep on the job, whatever it is, right? It's funny, there's a joke, like they say, it's there's some truth to it. They say, there's so many Jews in Brooklyn, there's they say at least 500,000 Jews in Brooklyn. 500,000. If not more. I'm talking, that's only the documented ones. What about the undocumented? Whatever it is, right? So, Brooklyn is a very Jewish town, even more than Queens. Okay? So it's the most Jewish town in America. Right? So the funny thing is, if you open the phone book, right, in Brooklyn, like half the people over there are rabbis. Like rabbi this, rabbi. So you're wondering, what's the whole town is rabbis over here? So
God gives smicha to everybody.
Yeah, I think it's the phone company they're giving smicha. Ma Bell is giving the smicha. So anyway, right? Why am I saying that? Because in a town like Brooklyn, you probably have 10,000 rabbis, who made a eruv for you. So you can rest easy, there's no problem with that. Okay, because each one of those rabbis thinks he's the rabbi of the town, so he makes an eruv for everybody. So that's the way it goes. Okay. That's why they say, that if the Jews in Brooklyn, would make aliyah, go to Israel, that would totally increase the population over there, and also it would increase the population of the right wing, the more religious camp, So that would like tilt the scale altogether, like that would tilt the scale to the religious side. So whatever. Wishful thinking, right? Maybe one day Brooklyn will move over to Israel. Okay. There's a lot of good Jews over there in Brooklyn, very God-fearing, big rabbis, big scholars, all kinds of things, going on there. It's huge. It's colossal. Okay. Anyway, let's go on. So it says, right, that as we said, if he did it on purpose and he cooked, right, we allow him to eat it. So look what he says right now. He says, "Aval im he'erim levashel shti kederot." So he says, but if he made two pots, right? So Bigo is trying to be a wise guy, making two. He wants to have also one for today, one for tomorrow, right? If he did that, he says he's not allowed to eat it. There we don't allow him to eat it, he says. Interesting. We'll see if that's halakha, right? Very interesting point. Oh, okay, we'll talk about that after, right? First, let's go to Bet Yosef. So it says Bet Yosef over here, brings a source for this. If Shah Lomar Balai Tur, it says possible to say the Balai Tur, Meforesh Tehad Aminan, he explains that which we said, he can't bake for others. That means that the flour belongs to him. He cannot cook it for himself or others. The Kimacho Nesar, because his flour is forbidden, right? Shahu Shalo, because it belongs to him. When it comes to flour that belongs to others, sheinichu eruv mutar, they make an eruv, those people. It's allowed. Lo lefoto lesorcham, you can cook it for them. The shlucho shel adam kemoto, because he's their agent, right? Shliach. Kumakom, anyway, right? Either case, hashtat de braita lo mashma, right? But he says, he says the simple meaning of the braita doesn't apply like that. So, right, he says, because really the truth is, right, according to the simple meaning of that, even if the flour belongs to others and they made an eruv, right, you're not allowed to cook it, even for their needs, right? So he said that's the way the Rambam also seems to write. So, in other words, we don't pass like the Balai Tur, right? Bottom line, right? So that it seems to be agreed on, right? Because the Tur also didn't like it, and Maran doesn't like it either. So there you go, right? Okay, it's unanimous. All right. So I think we have another piece over here to do in Bet Yosef. Half bet. This one. Okay. Let's see what we can do with it. Okay, so it says like this. Now wrote, right, so we got to read this in the Torah a little bit further. It says the Torah. So it says if there's no other people there, right, who made an eruv, and in order they should be able to give it to them to cook, right, whatever. So he says the rabbis allowed him here in this case just to do enough for his survival, right? To make a survival kit for himself. Mishum kavod Shabbat. Why? Because of the honor of Shabbat, he says. לעשות דבר מועט, ואפילו הוא בעצמו, right, כגון להפות כיכר אחד, ובשל קדרה אחד. Oh, so look what he says, right? The rabbis allowed him, in this case, right, where he has no other recourse, right? As we said, right, the rabbi, he's not relying on the rabbi for sure, right? Because if he was, he would have no problem. So, we're talking about without the rabbi. So, what can he do? So he says he's allowed to bake one loaf of bread, one, and make one dish, right? Very skimpy kind of a Shabbat, right? We don't want this kind of a Shabbat, right?
How is that
one
possible?
and one.
He needs to have 2 loaves of bread for separating, no?
Yeah, good. Okay, good. So what do you say about that? What's the answer? Right? So what we tell him, right? Yeah, you want 2, huh? So we tell him crime doesn't pay. I'm sorry, criminals don't get to be, they don't get to splurge. You get the idea? Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. You should have had 2, but yeah, you should have thought about that yesterday. When you fell asleep, on the job. So then we're going to tell you, right? Now you're going to have to go minimal, right? You have to go minimalistic, right? No fancy stuff, no extra stuff. Okay. It's basically a punishment, we're punishing the guy, right? To teach him a lesson.
Kavod Harav, and that's not going to detract from his simcha on Yom Tov.
You're right, so too bad, Okay,
Shabbat.
yeah, you're right. It's Shabbat, right? It's not right, not really Yom Tov. It's Shabbat, it's Shabbat because he's cooking for Shabbat. But anyway, right, the point is, right, too bad, yeah, you wanted to have simcha, so you should have thought about that yesterday, when you were messing around, Yeah. Now you remembered about simcha, now you remember? Yesterday you forgot, right? So, this is like a general theme, by the way, in the Torah, that the rabbis don't respect people who don't, prepare Shabbat and Yom Tov, on time. They disrespect you, like, where were you? Like, yeah, now all of a sudden you woke up. What about yesterday? Where were you? That's why the rabbi said, right? Whoever prepares on Erev Shabbat will eat on Shabbat, If you prepare, you'll eat good, right? That's the thing. If you don't, you're gonna have to be a pauper, right? Go into your freezer, and get some frozen food, and take it out. That's what you deserve, because you didn't prepare. Okay. Also, it says we allow him to light one candle, right? One. Oh, we give you one candle. That's it. Minimalistic. Katav Rabbeinu Meir.
The halakha is 1 candle. I just thought that you couldn't do the blessing on the bread if it wasn't
Right.
2.
The truth is the minimum is 1, right? But the custom is to do at least 2, right?
Right, but for the candles, but I thought the minimum on the bread was 2.
Yeah, that's only for the good boys.
Okay.
But for the bad boys, no, we don't give you.
Okay.
Yeah. Learn your lesson next time. Okay. Same thing, by the way, let's say, for instance, right, you have a person, okay? He doesn't have 2 loaves, and he needs to eat, Seudah Shlishit, the 3rd meal, right? So he blesses on 1 loaf, what are you going to do? You're not going to eat because you don't have 2? And so In other words, you can live with one. It's just that two is the proper way to do it. You didn't do the mitzvah the best way, the proper way. Okay, so that's the story there. כתב רבנו מאיר, this is מרוטנבורג, says this rabbi, שיכול לחפש בחדר שום חפץ בנר, אפילו מבעוד יום, ולהניחו דולק עד הלילה. So that's interesting, right? What is this rabbi saying here? So he says he can search in the room, right? Right. Okay. Okay. I see what he's saying over here. In other words, what you do is, right, you do like a sort of a loophole over here, right? He's telling you. What's a loophole? Like, you're going into a room, right, to look for something and it's dark there. So all of a sudden, gee whiz, I need to light a candle because I'm looking for my lost item. So you're doing like a rouse, ruse, whatever they call it, right? Something like that. Right? I feel maybe this is even before, right? Before Shabbat, whatever. So then you just leave it right lit, So in other words, you're doing a trick, to light a candle, basically, right? That's what he's saying. That's the way he suggests to do it. When you didn't make your eruv, bad boy, right? You didn't make it. You're gonna be in trouble.
So what, once you've lit your candle, then you can cook?
No, he's just talking about a candle. In other words, you lit your candle by using a ruse.
Okay, so if you don't have an eruv, you cannot even light the Shabbat candles?
Right, so we discussed last week, if you recall, that it's a machloket, right, regarding the candle. Some say you need a candle, you need an eruv for the candle as well. But we paskin, right, Maran paskin, that you don't need a eruv for the candle, So this is going according to the opinion that you do need an eruv for the candle. But Maran holds that you don't need an eruv to light the candles.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good. Okay, I guess we'll stop there. We still have a ways to go here. So, B'ezrat Hashem, we'll continue tomorrow, Thursday. Thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. B'ezrat Hashem, and Chazak u'Baruch, Laila Tov. We'll see you tomorrow night.
Thank you.
God willing. God bless. All the blessings.